Hi again. This is the third clip in the syntax section. In the last clips, we dealt with a general introduction to syntax and the differences between grammatical function and structure. Click here if you want to see more. Now we are going to have a look at the verb phrase in more detail. Let's have a look at a new phrase marker. Bold Bavarian Bertha gave him a black eye at the Oktoberfest. If we look at this phrase marker more closely, we will understand the difference between modifiers and complements a bit better. Remember what we said about modifiers being optional and complements being necessary? The phrase marker shows exactly that. Splitting off a prepositional phrase from the verb phrase on level 2 leaves us with a verb phrase on level 3. But if we split off the noun phrases, we are left with something we call a verb group. The prepositional phrase as a modifier doesn't change the partner's category. The verb phrase only changes into a verb group by splitting off the complements, these two noun phrases. The verb phrase takes different numbers of complements. In this sentence, it takes 2 further complements, 2 objects to be exact. Again, the verb is the decisive factor when it comes to the amount of complements the sentence has. The number of modifiers can be ignored. This complement stuff is reflected in 7 groups of sentences that we find in the English language. These are differentiated by the number and types of complements. The first is marked by SV. This group of verbs takes no complements. The verbs are intransitive. The second is SVO. These verbs take 1 complement, often the noun phrase. The function of this complement is direct object. These verbs are monotransitive. The subject is the thing that does something, the verb describes the action, and the object is the thing the agent is performing on. The third is SVP. Here we have a group of verbs that don't introduce another actor, but still call for a complement. This complement describes the subject further. Often the complement is an adjective or a noun phrase. These verbs are intensive. SVA. In this group again we find no further agent, but further specification in the complement. Often prepositional phrases function as adverbials. The verbs in the 5th category take 2 complements, 2 objects to be precise. That's why we call them ditransitive. Here, the subject performs, the verb describes the action, the indirect object is a kind of receiver of the action, and the direct object is the thing the subject is performing on. Similarly to SVP, the rightmost complement is a further specification. In this case, however, the complement describes the object more closely. This is called object predicative. These kinds of verbs are complex transitive. Other than in SVOO, the predicative doesn't introduce a further actor. Finally, SVOA. Here, the second complement blank is filled by a prepositional phrase that functions as an adverbial. These are the 7 basic sentence patterns. Remember, any number of modifiers can be added to these. They only reflect the complements. Let's now have a look at the node we haven't yet explained any further, the verb group. Firstly, the verb group can be split up into the main verb, or lexical verb, and the auxiliaries, such as be and have, and modal verbs like can, must, and so on. The main verb is the verb that the verb group is really about. The auxiliaries and the modals shape the meaning of the verb additionally in grammatical categories like tense or aspect. Let's have a look at the positions of these elements of the verb group in this example. The main verb is always the last verb in the verb group. If there is only one verb in the verb group, then that one is also the main verb. The auxiliary node is either empty or filled by a combination of tense, modality, voice, or aspect. Whatever grammatical category is expressed, the order is always the same. The first verb expresses tense, either present or past. The second is filled by modality. The third and fourth positions are filled by aspect, either by perfect, as in have accompanied by an ed participle, or in progressive, be plus an ing participle. And the last spot is taken by the voice, in this case passive, marked by be and the ed participle. There are a couple of special verbs that can be either auxiliaries or main verbs. These verbs are called primary verbs, and they are be, have, and do. Let's have a look at some examples. I have a cat with no tail. Here, have is the main verb, as it is the only verb in the verb group. I have found a cat with no tail. Here, have is not the main verb because it isn't the last verb in the verb group. It does, however, form the perfect. I do not know cats without tails. Do is only used to carry negation. When auxiliaries are there solely to help with negation and stand before the negative particle not, then we call these auxiliaries operators. The cat was not there. The operator in this sentence is was, as it stands before the negative particle. But it is also the main verb, as does the only and last verb in the verb group. Be can therefore be the main verb and the operator. Do can't, as you can't say, I didn't my homework. Have can be main verb and operator at the same time. So you can say, I haven't a clue. And of course you can use a separate word with have also, as in, I don't have a clue. Oh my, verbs everywhere, and not a drop to drink. Instead, let's summarize all this verb shiz. Once all the modifiers have been split off the verb phrase, we are left with something called the verb group and a number of complements, or only a verb group. The complements reflect the verb's transitivity, and this transitivity determines the 7 basic sentence patterns of English. We talked about intensive and intransitive, monotransitive, ditransitive, and complex transitive verbs. The verb group has an internal structure, with the main verb always being the last verb in the verb group. If there is only one verb in the verb group, then it is also the main verb. Additionally, there are modal and auxiliary verbs, and they perform functions concerning tense, modality, aspect, and voice. There are special verbs that we call primary verbs: be, have, and do. Be can be main verb or operator, do can only be an operator, and have can be both at the same time. We have now reached the end of our syntax excursion. Head over to the other chapters if you'd like to experience an introduction to other disciplines of linguistics.